All right, so here we are with the plane again. I have these little blue control horns I was missing in the last video. There's 3D printed. You can use the ones I gave you in class with those, print your own in a different color or something, or you can even use just a piece of a credit card or something for something like this. All you really need to do is have the control horn be able to pop into the wing in those little spots that are cut out there. I'll zoom in a little bit here so I can get this right. There we go. Pop in a little spot here. Okay. And then we'll have our servo. Let's see which one. This one here? No, this one here. Okay. Which one was it? Sorry, I just had these laid out. Have our servo, okay, oriented such that it can move that control surface up and down with the little push rod. So we're going to go ahead and start gluing these control horns in. But we do want to make sure we don't glue the control horn in and the servo on before we've attached our little push rod. Okay, here's a push rod that we're going to use for this. If you don't know how to make push rods or don't know what I'm talking about, make sure you watch the video where I talk about servos and how to make push rods and bend those up for your use. So let's make sure we get the right fit here. Okay, I'm going to use this servo on this side. You might remember if you watched the servo video already, I want the servo lead facing towards where the receiver is going to be at. Okay, so I want it to go over here. I don't want to use a servo where it's set up like this with the wire coming out the back, because then I got to run the wire back over around like this. So make sure you put your control horn on the right side. So if we look at these two servos, if we held them the same way with the wires the same way, one has a control horn up and one has a control horn down. Right, so they've been set up that way because one's meant to be used on one side, one's meant to be used on the other side, left and right hand side of the plane. This one here is meant to be used on this side of the plane. Zoom out a little bit here. And then we have our other one for the other side of the plane. Okay? And those match up pretty well with where we want the wires to go. And the control, the push rods go right there, one on each side to set that up. And so then we'll be in good shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the control horn in first. I can attach the push rod beforehand if I want, I guess. And then I'm going to make sure I get the push rod attached, get everything set up so the aileron's nice and neutral. Okay. And then, oops, sorry, wrong way. And then, last of all, I'm going to glue the servo down, and that way I'll be able to move it around a little bit if I need to change its position a little bit to make sure at neutral on the servo, the control surface is also at neutral. It's not up or down or something like that. So we'll go through that process for one aileron. I'll let you do the other aileron as well. I'll give you a little bit of a head start on that one, then we'll do the elevator together. All right, so I'm going to take this other one off here. And we notice on the setup here, okay, so when we do this, we want to have the push rod go through the servo horn and the control horn, right? So we're going to have to bend our push rod in a certain fashion. Okay, so if you look at this push rod here, and you look at this push rod, right, they're bent differently. So this one has kind of the little Z or jog on the same side. This one has them on different sides. Okay, so it's meant to go, kind of shift it over a little bit. And that's kind of what we want to do with this. The control horn is just a little bit further in than the servo will be lined up with. So we want to kind of line it up by using the push rod in that manner, as opposed to trying to use this one where they'd have to be pretty much in line with each other, if that makes sense. So just think about that, how you're laying out your push rods, how you're bending them before you start gluing stuff. It'll be easier to measure things before you've glued anything down. All right, let's do our control horn in first here. Okay, pull that out. It just presses into here, but we want to add some glue to it. We can't just leave it pressed in. It'll just pop out as soon as we try to fly the plane. So I'm going to go ahead and just take the glue gun. We're going to put a little bit of hot glue kind of over around this hole that's kind of pre-cut for the control horn. I'm going to take the control horn in this orientation. I'm going to press this little tab down into the hole. So right here. Just push that down in there. And kind of hold the aileron here. Let me get around this. There we go. Hold it down so it's nice and sturdy and straight. We don't want it to be tilted over or anything like that. And just try to get it as best of a glue joint as you can without putting a crazy amount of glue on there. Okay, so we'll let that sit for a second. If you happen to have the control horns that I printed out of PLA, they will get pretty soft with this very hot glue. So you got to hold them until they cool and they harden up again. If you kind of move it when it's hot, it'll bend the whole 3D printed part and won't work very well. That is the one downside of printing them in PLA. I like to print them in PLA because I usually have it available. It's a little bit easier. But if you get the PETG ones, which I happen to print some of those in PETG, then they don't melt as low of a temperature, so you can more easily use them. There'll be a mix of them available for you in class. Okay, so we did that. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the back side too. Let's see if I can get that on the camera. There we go. Just to kind of try to seal the deal here. Remember not to get the glue into the hinge area. So don't get the glue, in this hinge because we don't want that to affect the movement there. We do want to get some glue on the push rod or on the control horn though, and just make sure it's nice and secure. It's not going to pop out when we're flying or put any stress on it from trying to move the surface in flight. Okay. So there's the control horn. All right. We're going to grab our servo we're going to use. These servos have been used before, so I've got some leftover paper on the back. I'm going to try to just kind of glue over that for this purpose and pick some of the glue off a little bit. But we're going to grab our control horn. We're going to thread it through about the middle hole. Tends to be pretty good, pretty average. You don't need to go all the way here or all the way here. The middle works pretty well. And we're going to take our control horn and just thread it through the servo there. Okay. Make sure that everything's lining up right. Oh, see, I put it on the outside of the control horn. I actually want to put it on the inside. That's my bad. So instead of starting from that side, we'll start from this side and feed it through. And watch your fingers. It can poke your fingers. Okay, there we go on the inside of the servo. So that's better. And that aligns just about perfectly with the control horn. Okay, so that's really good. And what we'll do now, as long as the control horn is cooled enough that it's not going to move on us too much or something like that, we're going to work this other end through the control horn, and then we can put glue on the servo and stick it down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and thread that. There's just one hole. Oops, lost the camera here, sorry. There's just one hole. If I can get that on camera. On the control horn. Come on, camera, you can do it. Focus on me, focus on me. I'll try showing you guys on a different one here. There's just one hole in the control horn, so you don't have to worry about picking which hole or anything like that. It's just a small hole there. You'll thread the push rod through, and then you're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Again, making sure I'm threading it through the right way, so I'm going to want to come from this side and kind of work it through that way. And we'll go, sorry, let me zoom out so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Through that little hole, I'll flex it through the control, there we go. Okay, and we're connected now, so that's good. You can see how the servo will kind of pivot around that spot. And so the servo's still loose, but the control rod's glued in and the push rod's on. So we're going to figure out a servo where it's going to go. We want the surface to be neutral. Okay, so it doesn't hurt to double check here. I'm going to double check with my radio. Power on my radio. Grab my, grab my ESC, my receiver, my radio, and a battery. Okay, this will allow me to power up the servo and make sure it's centered before I glue anything and make a mistake that I would regret. And so here we go. I'm going to put this on, start from the bottom. Okay. Go here, that'll power up the receiver. Oops. Okay. We can plug in our servo to channel 1, for example. That's our Aileron channel, so we'll plug it in there. And we can see the servo should move. Okay, but when we let go of the stick, it's going to be centered. So we know the servo's centered. Okay, so that's good. It shouldn't move really too much unless we're really pushing on the arm with our hand. So we can leave the arm right there. And we can say, okay, the servo's centered. Let's get our surface nice and neutral. Try to show this here. We don't want the surface to be like way up or way down. We want it to be nice and neutral, so even with the rest of the wing. Okay, and that is where we want to have our servo in that spot when we glue it down, so that everything's neutral and in place. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move this radio out of the way here for a second. Okay, Unplug that so it's not yelling at me. There we go. All right. So on the bottom of your servo, you want to like scratch it up. Whether you have glue from being an old servo like mine or whether it's a brand new servo, you want to scratch up the surface you're going to glue because the hot glue will grip better if it is has something to grip into. If it's just the smooth flat plastic, or even worse, the sticker on the servo, if it's just glued to the sticker, it'll just pop off as soon as the glue gets cold or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can do this probably ahead of time, would have been better, but I'm going to go ahead and rough it up a little bit right now, and just kind of scratch it up with the razor blade here. You could use some sandpaper if you wanted to. I'm just trying to cut some grooves into, in my case, the leftover glue, but cut some grooves into the plastic of your servo case is a great idea. It's not going to hurt the servo at all unless you're going like super deep grooves, but just some nice slices to make it so it's rough to the touch and not smooth anymore, because that will make the glue stick a lot better. So that's relatively rough. Let's see. Got some slices in there. Hopefully the new hot glue will help melt this glue a little bit, but you guys won't have to worry about that. So go ahead and apply it. A generous amount of glue. You don't have to go crazy, but you definitely want the servos to stay attached. Okay. And we're going to flip it over. Again, making sure our surface is neutral. So kind of holding it here, making sure it's neutral. We're going to place the servo down and push it as far as we can towards this way. Oops, sorry, this way. So it's up against that wall. Okay, as well as pushing it into the wing, of course, so it gets glued. I'm going to check my neutral here. Move my servo a little bit so that it has a nice neutral point, and push the servo down into the wing as hard as we can without crushing the foam. Sorry, it's off camera. I'm just trying to make sure it's neutral here. So we want our aileron to be nice and even and flat so we don't have to do too much trimming. Okay, we'll hold that one down there. All right, let's make sure the glue gets nice and set before we let go so it doesn't shift on us or anything. Just checking mine one more time. Looks pretty good. I might have got a little bit high. That's all right. Try your best there. And we have our push rod there nice and secure. So once that cools a little bit, we'll plug it back in and double check things, make sure they're working okay, moving okay. Might need to bend the push rod a little bit more to make sure it's not rubbing on the control horn. Actually, I just noticed that. Okay, so I think that's relatively good. I can probably let go of it now at least. Okay. We'll kind of mock up the other side, and then you guys can do that on your own. But similar idea here. We're going to place our control horn in the aileron, glue that in, right? Get our servo ready. Let's see, which one? This one here. Okay. And then we'll get our push rod. Make sure that's all looking like it's going to work. Everything's working okay, you know. And we'll glue our control rod in, or control horn in, sorry. Control horn in. Attach the push rod to the control horn. Attach it to the servo. Scratch up the servo. And make sure we have a nice neutral, not up, not down, on the aileron there. And then glue the servo down. And the exact same process as the other side, just kind of mirrored. All right, so this should be cool enough now. Hopefully we can plug this in. Let me turn the transmitter back on and see if we can move our aileron. That's exciting when you finally get it to the plane to move around and do what you want it to do a little bit. Okay, there we go. And plug our aileron in here. Okay, good. It didn't just jump as soon as I plugged it in, so that means I had it neutral. Let's see here. There we go. That's pretty good. Woohoo, we're halfway to a working set of ailerons, so hopefully that encourages you. Get both of those done, and the next video we'll do the elevator.